Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Applying Ethology webinars. I am Laura Whalen, a PhD student at the University of British Columbia, and I've been working with Christian Nowroth, Jen-Yan Chow, and Rachel Park to organize these webinars. I want to remind you all to please turn off your camera and your microphone. Should you have questions for our speaker, please type them in the chat box, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. Today, it is my privilege to welcome Katarína to share her work on the effect of early social environment on the dairy calf development. Katarína is affiliated with the Czech University of Life Sciences in Prague, where she is especially interested in research on improving dairy calf welfare, assessing effective states and pain in farm animals, and the role of the social environment for animal development. Without further ado, Katarína, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for introducing me, Laura. And I'd like to welcome everybody at my talk about dairy calves. So I'm going to present the results that were part of my PhD project, and they were supported by Institute of Animal Science in Prague and Czech University of Life Sciences Prague. Can you hear me, Laura?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I would like to speak about the early social environment of a dairy calf. So dairy calves would naturally stay close to their mothers for approximately 2 weeks of their age. Then they would spend most of their time with their conspecific, mostly playing or resting. They would be naturally weaned at approximately 10 months of their age. On the contrary, dairy calves kept for commercial purposes are separated from their mothers very soon after birth, and they are housed individually. Individual housing is prevailing in Europe and in Czech Republic. However, percentages are a bit lower now because there is a slow tendency of farmers to adopt social housings. It may be due to the fact that individual housing impairs many aspects of dairy calf welfare. Social abilities of individually housed calves are poorer. For example, they rank lower in a social hierarchy than group house calves. They are also play deprived, and their feed intake and body weight gain is decreased compared to group housed calves. A problem is that individual housing is more practical for farmers than group housing. For example, individually housed cows are easier to manipulate or observe for signs of illnesses. Therefore, there would be good to find something like a compromise, a golden middle way between farm practice and dairy calf welfare. And this could be achieved by housing cows in pairs. Pair housing seems to be similar, like group housing in a term of welfare. For example, it was found that pair house cows are less fearful compared to individually housed cows. Their learning abilities in a reversal task are also better compared to individually housed cows, and they are also able to cope with stress after weaning better. However, there are some limitations. First of all, studies on feed intake and growth in individually and pair house cows are inconclusive. Some studies found improved feed intake and growth in pair house cows, while others didn't. Secondly, there is a lack of knowledge on particular topics. For example, there are not so many studies on health of pair house cows, or we actually don't know if pair housing can improve a subjective experience of dairy cows. Moreover, there is no study on the effect of social buffering on cows' reaction to disbudding. Therefore, we aim to compare learning abilities, affective states, feed intake, body weight gain, and health of individually and pair house cows. We also wanted to know if pair house cows feed more and grow better after disbudding compared to individually house cows. So for our experiment, we used 66 Holstein heifers housed either in pairs or individually. Here you can see a timeline of the most important experimental procedures. So cows were assigned to a housing treatment at 4 to 11 days of their age, and they were given 1 week to habituate to new conditions. Then they started to be trained for a cognitive judgment bias task. When the cognitive judgment bias task was finished, all cows were disbudded. So first of all, methods on learning abilities. So our cows were trained to touch a trial initiator to get a bucket with a reward that was milk placed at a positive location in an experimental arena. When our cows reached learning criteria, they were trained to discriminate between a positive and a negative location. The discrimination criterion was to show at least 13 go responses out of 16 positive and 13 no-go responses out of 16 negative trials in 2 consecutive sessions. A go response was defined as touching the bucket, and in case of presenting negative stimuli, our cows were supposed to initiate a new trial. Now to the methods on affective states. When our cows reached discrimination criteria, they were tested in 4 testing sessions. 1 testing session consisted of presenting 16 positive, 16 negative, and 3 ambiguous or middle trials. Cows' reaction to ambiguous trials were interpreted in an accordance with cognitive bias theory, so we expected if pair house cows are in more positive affective states, they should also respond with more go responses to ambiguous or middle trials. Now I would like to show you a short video clip from our cognitive judgment bias experiment. So the cow touched a trial initiator, and now it's taking a reward from a teat bucket. However, you could have only seen a red teat of the bucket because its rest is behind the wall. I was also standing behind the wall to pour milk to the bucket. Now you will see cow's reaction to negative location when she will be finished. Yes, now she's finished, so she's going to initiate a new trial. Okay, and she's not go there because she's learned a discrimination, and now again positive trial. Please watch the cow carefully now because we will see her reaction to ambiguous stimuli that will be presented in between positive and negative location. I think she's almost finished. Yes, now she's finished. A new trial initiation, and this trial is going to be ambiguous. And she interpreted is like negative, now real negative, and now positive once more. Okay, so we can carry on. Now to methods on health, feed intake, and body weight gain. So we were recording an occurrence of diarrhea and respiratory problems every day for a whole experimental period. We were also measuring intake of calf starter and milk, also every day for whole experimental period. Our cows were weighted 3 times per experiment, one time or first time at the beginning of the experiment before assigning to a housing treatment. Then they were weighted after finishing cognitive judgment bias task, one time before disbudding and next time after disbudding. And now we can start with results. So first of all, results on learning abilities. So all our cows were able to learn operant task, but only 10 cows from individual treatment and 11 from pair housing treatment were able to learn also discrimination learning. And there was no significant effect of housing treatment on cows' learning abilities. Total learning means operant plus discrimination learning. Okay, we can continue with results on affective states. Well, here you can see that our cows were trained to discriminate between a positive and a negative location very well, also during testing, because they almost always went to the positive and only rarely went to the negative. When we look at cows' reaction to ambiguous stimuli, near positive, middle, and near negative, we can see that pair house cows responded to them more positively than individually housed cows. And this difference was significant. Based on this, we can say that pair housing makes cows more optimistic. So if you would like to know more about our results on learning abilities and affective states in dairy cows, you can already read about it. Okay, we can carry on. Results on health. Here you can see that there was no significant effect of housing treatment on occurrence of diarrhea and respiratory problems. Okay, next, results on starter intake and milk intake on the next slide. So there was also no significant effect of housing treatment on starter intake of individually or pair house cows. And we found the same for milk consumption. Again, no significant effect of housing treatment. And as we didn't find any significant difference across treatments in feed consumption, it's not so surprising. It was the same for body weight gain of our cows. But quite interesting is that daily average gains were almost the same for both housing treatment. You can see it here. Quite interesting. Okay, now the effect of disbudding on starter intake. So we found a similar effect of disbudding on starter intake of pair housed and individually housed cows. And it was approximately same in case of body weight gain. Again, no significant difference between treatments. Now back to our aim and hypothesis. So we only confirmed one of our hypotheses. It was hypothesis on affective states. The rest of our hypotheses, with one exception on hypothesis on health, has to be rejected. Let's discuss our results. Our findings on similar learning abilities in individually and pair house cows are in accordance with two other studies, and it together implies that pair housing doesn't improve cows' performances in more simple tasks than a reversal learning. To discussion of effective states. This is a first study comparing effective states of differentially housed cows. Our finding that pair housing improves the subjective experience of dairy cows is consistent with findings of other studies who found that individually housed cows suffer from social isolation or decreased space allowance. I also have two suggestions for the further research. First of all, I would like to know for how long can these positive or negative consequences persist. Then I would like to suggest to add a group housing treatment to an experimental protocol to see if effective states of group house cows are approximately same or better compared to effective states of pair house cows. Now, discussion of health. So our findings on similar occurrence of diarrhea and respiratory problems in individual and pair house cows are consistent with findings of 4 other studies, but they are only partially consistent with findings of Liu et al., who found increased occurrence of diarrhea in 3 weeks old pair house cows. Now discussion of our similar results on feed intake and body weight gain in individually and pair house cows. So our results are consistent with some studies, but they are inconsistent with other studies that found positive effects of pair housing. I was wondering why some studies found positive effects and others didn't. When there is a quite consistent positive effect of group housing on feed intake and body weight gain of dairy cows. And my only explanation would be that pair house cows do not have so many opportunities for social facilitation and social learning. So the difference between pair house cows and individually housed cows isn't so pronounced. I mean, it's more likely to be affected by another factors. And to effect of this burden on feed intake and body weight gain. So we found that this burden has similar effect on individually and pair house cows. Of course, we didn't do a longer term measurements that would be valuable, of course. And there is one very interesting question: if we would find positive effect of social buffering if we look at other parameters like wound healing or calf behavior. And right now we are preparing this kind of data for statistical analysis. So this question is going to be answered soon, hopefully. So your take-home message is that individually and pair house cows do not differ in learning abilities, health state, feed intake, growth, and their reaction to this burden. But pair housing can improve effective states of dairy cows, and that's pretty important. And last but not the least, I would like to thank all people who are involved in this huge project. First of all, to Marek, especially to Sarah, Agi, and Radka. So that's all I had. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer some questions.
Great job, Katarína. As I said at the start, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. But just to get us started, I have one for you. Why do you think the pair-housed calves are more positive? Do you think it could be that they're also just more competitive for a milk feeder? And so when they might see a bottle, they would be more inclined to go and give it a shot because they're used to, at least when I've seen calves in pair housing situations on farms, they tend to go between two bottles back and forth because they want the best of both worlds, where calves by themselves, they would only have access to one bottle at a time. Does that make sense?
Well, maybe could you repeat it?
Yeah. So you mentioned that overall that the calves and pairs are probably more positive, which I think is a really cool finding. But do you think it could also be that these calves are taught to be more competitive? So a calf that's in a pair housing situation, she would have access to two bottles at a time. And while they're eating in pairs, usually they go back and forth between the two bottles, wanting to try a bit of both, and calves that are by themselves are usually only given access to one bottle. And so then what I'm wondering is, could this calf that's in a pair situation have this social learning aspect that I need to be competitive and try as many different bottles as I can? And so could that bleed into a testing situation?
Okay, I already got it. Thank you for repeating. It's a quite interesting question. Thank you. So actually, I think yes, and I think there are already some data on it because there is at least one study who compared cows' reaction to weaning. They compared pair-housed and individually housed cows, and pair-housed cows were actually able to cope with weaning better. That means that, for example, they have shorter latencies to start to feed, and it could somehow imply they are also more competitive. So yes, I think they could.
Interesting. So we have a question from Celine. Very interesting, Katarína. Thank you. It is known that pair housing also modifies calves' human relationship, which is part of welfare. So I am wondering if in your future projects you also intend to test cognitive abilities in presence of humans. For example, testing how calves can learn from humans, like a pseudo-social learning, I would say. By the way, I'm happy to see Merrick and Radka's pictures, smiley face.
So thank you for this question. Of course, there should be more research on cognitive abilities in pair and individually housed cows because there are not so many studies on this topic. But right now we are only finishing data analysis of this data we already collected, and I don't think that there will be some other similar project in a close future at our department. So maybe it could be a suggestion for University of British Columbia as well. So, but in the future, yes, I would like to do it, but I don't see it as a for a close future at my department.
Great. Another question. Wonderful presentation. I would like to know how long the calves were housed either individually or in pairs before the cognitive test. Were the calves housed individually or in pairs during the training sessions? Were the calves completely separate from their dams, or do they have a degree of contact with their dams?
Well, actually, I had it in my timeline of my experiment. It varied because we were doing two cognitive tests, and first of them, operant learning, we started when our cows were I cannot I cannot remember numbers, but it was approximately when cows were at 11 to 18 days old. And the second test started when the cows reached previous learning criteria. So it really varies. So they were in individual housing different lengths. So I actually cannot answer this question very well.
That's okay. This question is from Jillian. Hello, and thanks for your presentation. I am currently working with a graduate student who examined the use of social buffering during disbudding recovery on calf affective state. Now we are seeing whether the level of interaction between the calf pairs before disbudding influenced the effectiveness of social buffering. Do you think that if calves were pair-housed and disbudded together, they would display a more positive affective state after disbudding than if a calf was disbudded with an unfamiliar calf? I.e., would social buffering be more effective if the support calf is familiar?
Yes, I actually strongly believe in it because we have similar research that I already mentioned. But actually, there is one study from this year, and they compared cows' behavior after disbudding, and all cows were group housed. And these results are a little bit against our hypothesis because this research showed that cows actually search for seclusion, so they tend to separate themselves from a group. So I was a little bit surprised when I was reading this research, but I think also this hypothesis, our hypothesis, makes a sense. So I'm really interested in what we will find. But based on our results, it seems that we are not in so right direction. But we will see. But actually, to conclude it, I believe in it. That I believe in the effect of social support, but we'll see.
This question's from Sarah. I would like to add to Laura's question, if that's okay. It's a good point, but there are two aspects that make this explanation of the results more unlikely. First, calves were always trained individually, and they were trained for quite a number of sessions in which they probably learned that there was no competition. Second, the responses to the reference cues, positive, negative, are kind of a control, being similar to both treatment groups. That is not just about being more likely to check.
Oh, it wasn't a question. Okay.
No. Joanna asked, were there individually housed calves allowed to see and or sniff other calves?
Well, it also varied because sometimes neighboring pens were empty, and sometimes they were some cows. So because it was from practical reasons, because our research was done on commercial farm, and I couldn't have balanced it better, so it varied.
Good. While we're waiting to see if there's any more questions that come up, I have another question. So you mentioned Mahar's paper in 2015 with the reversal learning task. Do you think that you could have added a reversal learning component to your study? Because you mentioned that there wasn't any differences in learning for the individually versus pair house calves. But if I remember correctly, I don't think that Mahar did either until the reversal learning part.
Well, we actually did it, but I have to admit that it failed because our cows had only 40 days to learn operand and discrimination task, and I somehow didn't calculate that a reversal task will be so difficult for them. So actually, no one of our cows reached learning criterion for reversal learning. So I don't have any data on it, but I was keen to do it, and it was part of my research, but it failed.
I don't know that I would call it a fail. I think that training animals is really hard, and it takes a lot of practice, and the more training regimes we go through, the more we learn to refine the techniques, and I think that's a discussion point in itself.
Yes, and it was a first study like this at our department, so I wasn't so experienced by training of cows, so yes.
But you did it, so that's huge.
Yes, but I can't publish it.
Well, that might go to a discussion on publishing. Another question. Hi, Katrina. Thank you for the great presentation. You were raising the question if the cognitive bias would be different between pair-housed and group-housed calves. I would assume that this is confounded with space allowance, since the more calves you have, the more available space per calf they have for running around. I think there is a study on piglets that they show more locomotor play when they have more space at least. Was the space between your individually and pair house calves equal, or could that be a factor here as well?
Well, basically, I think that effective states of group house cows would be better compared to pair house cows, but if group house cows would be in two big groups, I don't think it would be the case, because for example, if you have around 30 cows in one group, so I think it's also a bit stressful for them, especially if the management is not so good. For example, if there are not so many feeding stations and so on. So in that case, I would say their effective stage would be maybe the same like warehouse cows, or maybe even worse. But in smaller groups, for example, in cows, in groups of 10 or maybe a little bit less other cows, yes, of course, it should be better. But there is no research on it, and it would be so interesting.
Great. What behavioral observation did you see in paired calves which indicates positive welfare?
Oh, well, actually, we didn't. I don't have data on it because we were only looking on learning abilities, body weight gain, health, and so on. But just my personal observation is that they didn't have so many abnormal behaviors. I mean, oral abnormal behaviors like tunnel playing or something like that, or excessive self-grooming or something like this. But again, I don't have any data on it, so it's just my opinion.
Next question. Hi, Katrina and Sarah also. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on other possible interpretations for the cognitive bias test. Currently, we explain it as optimistic and pessimistic, depending on the reactions to ambiguous cues, but could it also be cautious or not, or any other explanations? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure if I understood the question, so maybe could you repeat it?
Yeah, so when we look at cognitive bias tests, we usually lump the reactions as either optimistic or pessimistic. But could it also be that the animals aren't necessarily optimistic or pessimistic, but they're cautious versus confident? Do you have any other ideas of how we could interpret the ambiguous cues? Or do you think it's definitely optimism and pessimism?
Well, it's quite a difficult question. Okay, I already understand. So oh, maybe yes, but in case our cows, I think it is not the case, because in that case we would find more positive affective states in individually housed cows, because they should enjoy training procedure more, because they were quite bored in their home pens. And my personal observation is that they were really keen to do something, you know, to be trained or something like that. But so I can just say that I don't think it was the case of our study, but maybe, mm, but maybe it could in other studies, but I don't know. It's a difficult question. Sorry. Maybe Sarah will help us.
Yeah, I'll give her a moment to see if she types anything in, or she's welcome to jump in and chat as well. Nice presentation, Katrina. Did you see a lot of cross-sucking in the paired calves?
Okay, thank you for question. Well, again, I don't have any data on it because it wasn't one of our aims, but cross-sucking was present, especially around feeding times. But I wouldn't say it was, there was a high occurrence of cross-sucking. I think it was only shortly before feedings and shortly after. But I wouldn't say it was a very big problem here.
Great. Do you expect you would find different results in group housing after of greater than 2 calves? So groups bigger than 2, do you think that there would be different results?
Well, is it question related to effective states or the whole aspects of my research?
It's open-ended question, so I guess effective states and health.
Okay, so I already said my opinion on effective states. So I think that if there would be 5 or maximum 12 cows in one group, their effective states would be better compared to effective states of pair house cows. And to other aspects, our research, I think there could be impaired health state of group house cows because in general, group house cows, some studies found impaired health state in group house cows, but it's also very variable because there are many factors like amount of milk, fat, hygiene, and I don't know what else. So maybe we would find that our group house cows would have impaired health state, and I think uh, their body weight gain and feed intake would be increased. I think we would find something significant there.
Great. It doesn't look like we have any more questions in the, oh, there is one more. If a calf that was housed individually was paired and those paired became individually housed, so if you did a crossover design, will there be any chance of getting a different result? Like, yeah, so like a crossover design.
Okay, so it's quite complicated question again. So, uh, yes, maybe effective state of pair house cows would be even worse than compared to individual house cows, but I don't know.
How about this? Do you think that there's any like critical time period for social housing for calves? Like, do you think that if they're paired at a certain age, that might have more important effects than if they're paired later? So if you did a crossover design, you might see developmental effects.
Well, I know that critical period is in their very early ontogeny, so they should be basically paired. I don't know, at day 5 or maybe later 7, because I know some studies when they paired them later, for example, around 30 days of their age, so they didn't find anything significant. But I don't think that there is something what would be a really critical period. You know that, for example, if you house them from 7 days and later, so you are not going to find anything. So I don't think we have something like that for cows already. I don't know if I answer this question, but
No,
sorry.
it was good. Sarah's jumped in here for back to Jen's question, so I'll just read it for the audience. It's a big question, Jen. Optimistic and pessimistic is here defined as expecting something positive or expecting something negative, which is why it's also written in inverted commas. Mike Mendel himself is very careful with this. It can be influenced by personality, and factors like being cautious or confident will likely affect the responses to the calves. There are a few studies showing the link between personality and responses in the JBT, so it's probably an interaction of personality and mood, I guess. but there is still so much unknown. Also, the effect of short-term emotions and long-term mood on judgment bias. And Jen says, thank you for the discussion and the answers, and more research is required. And perhaps the last question is from Anina, asking, just out of curiosity, for how long are calves individually housed in the Czech Republic?
For how long? Around for 2 months, yes. I think in the most of Europe, it's around 2 months of their age. It's also Czech Republic, yes. So, are there any questions?
There appear to be no more questions. So thank you very much, Katarína, for your lovely presentation and your eloquent answers to these questions.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Sarah, for helping me with some questions. And thank you to everybody for joining this meeting.